Okay, so next up, we unfortunately don't have Siobhan O'Connor, and I'm absolutely going to butcher this name, but I think Jeroen Jongejans, and they unfortunately couldn't be here today, but they did have a conversation, and I'm going to show that video. Siobhan is a World Ocean Day Youth Council member from New Zealand. She, while studying for her degree in marine biology and environmental studies, she studied coral reefs in French Polynesia, worked with New Zealand's Ministry for the Environment, started a digital education startup, and is part of an organization making a documentary focused on stopping marine plastic pollution. Jeroen is originally from the Netherlands, but for about 30 years, he's been involved in diving in New Zealand, and he is a really prominent in the environmental and diving scene in New Zealand. He's on various New Zealand tourism boards, economic development boards, etc. And is passionate about creating 30% marine protection in New Zealand by 2030. So their conversation is about opportunities and obstacles for 30 by 30 marine protection. And that conversation is what we're going to be hearing from now.
For those of you that don't know, 30 by 30 marine protection is a goal. It's a global goal to protect 30% of our world ocean by 2030. So it's a big goal, and today we're going to try and break it down a little bit and bringing some examples from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and specifically Poor Knights Islands. So firstly, I will just give you a little run through about what we'll be talking about today, starting out with introducing Jeroen, who we've got here today, and we're really lucky to be talking to him, and then a little bit about Aotearoa, New Zealand, for those who are overseas or those closer to home that don't know a lot about our marine environment or its protection. We'll just touch on a few things like types of marine protection, Katoki, which is a Māori proverb, and this one.
Give me a quick second. I think I can do it properly this time.
No worries.
Ko te kaura e kore ai, which roughly translates to wishing for the crayfish won't bring it. So yeah, thing to keep in mind as we have this discussion. So Jeroen, welcome. He is the co-owner of Dive to Kaka. He is a New Zealand marine expert, and he has built his own Polynesian sailing catamaran and worked with Wade Doak, which he was a legendary marine expert in New Zealand. And they made some documentaries in the 1980s, I believe. He helped to create the Poor Knights Islands Marine Reserve, helped to organise artificial reefs off the coast of Kaka, served as the president of New Zealand Underwater, and received the Leo Ducker Award and New Zealand Supreme Tourism Business Awards. There is so much to say. New Zealand Tourism Champion Award, recognised in the Northland Hall of Fame. He is extremely passionate, and I've seen this firsthand. And he's definitely played a massive role in my own passion for the marine environment. So thank you, Jeroen. And do you have anything you want to say to get us started?
Yeah, kia ora, everybody. Thanks, Siobhan. It's really nice to sort of talk to the next generation of really passionate marine advocates, because we do need it. I've been involved in the marine industry ever since I came to since I was born, actually. I was born in the Netherlands. I grew up 2 meters below sea level. So I was underwater for a long, long time in theory. Came to New Zealand, met, and I wanted to sort of build a boat to go protesting at Mururoa. In those days we had nuclear testing happening and things like that. So I settled in a little place called Kaka, close to the ocean. I met up with a guy called Wade Doak, who had a Polynesian catamaran, same like I had been building. And he had some issues with that. I helped him out. He taught me how to dive. He just didn't teach me just how to dive. He taught me about the underwater world, how it all connects together. And that's really important, because if you hop in the water and you see some fish swimming around down there, that's all very nice. It's like an aquarium. But if you understand the interrelationships that take place underwater, it suddenly becomes so much more interesting and you see so much more. And you can go to the same dive sites time after time again and recognize so many more things. It's not boring, it's just becoming more and more interesting. And if you do that on a regular basis, you start seeing all these strangers coming through that usually aren't there. And so you get a better feel of the whole site. When I started diving, not so long afterwards, I assisted with making a number of documentaries underwater and learned a lot about the poor nights from that. And we sort of thought, okay, we'll go around the Pacific and go diving and make some really good sort of documentaries. So we got a business grant together and designed a really snazzy sailing catamaran with glass bulbous bows, so we could have cameras in there, so you could see the dolphins swimming in between. And that was all fantastic. But that was 1987. And another thing in 1987 was a huge big share market crisis. So all the funding that we sort of had allocated for about gone. So we looked at, okay, so how could we make something like this work? And slowly but surely we thought, oh, if we get into tourism, we might be able to sort of, fulfill this dream. And so in 1992, we bought a tiny little dive shop into the Kaka with a single compressor, put in the second charter boat and started chartering, and went out to the Cornats Islands. At that stage, it was New Zealand's foremost marine reserve, of course. It's really attractive. Beautiful biodiversity, a little bit warmer, underwater caves, archways, big schools of fish, dolphins and whales on the way. It's just an amazing place now. It's New Zealand's best dive spot. And those of you that know Jacques Cousteau, famous man, he came out diving at the Poor Nights in the 1980s and named it one of the top 10 dive sites in the world. So it is really right up there. It's the best diving in New Zealand by far. Anyway, we used to diving. Oh, and we used to go diving over there, and only 5% of this so-called marine reserve was actually protected. And so 95% people could go fishing with floating lines, so they stuck a weight on it as well. But a lot of people didn't know where the 5% was. So in reality, we're fishing everywhere. So we take international tourists and out to the Poor Nights and say, oh, this is Poor Nights, this is brilliant marine reserve, and here we are in this 5% area. And then the boat would tie up next to us and start pulling out fish, and it just didn't make any sense. It's not sustainable. So the 5% didn't work. When it was negotiated, because it takes a long, long time to get a marine reserve organized, it's not easy. And there were huge compromises made that didn't actually help. But with it, the Department of Conservation that looks after and manages the marine reserve, they had a fishing notice and that would be reviewed. And in 1994, that fishing notice had to be reviewed. So we made submissions on it and said, look, it actually doesn't work. And that became the start of a 4-year battle, and battle, between those that wanted to protect the Poor Nights fully and those that only wanted to protect a little bit. And so we went forwards and backwards with lots of submissions, and lots of kids made submissions as well. And then the fishermen said, yeah, but kids are not allowed to make submissions because they don't even go out, they don't know anything. And kids, it's their future. Yeah, it's sort of all these things were happening. The Minister of Conservation at that stage, we took him out to the Poor Nights for a dive in, that was probably 87. And with New Zealand Underwater, we organized that. And we came up and we discussed the whole thing and the ecosystem, how important it was that it was a complete ecosystem that had to be protected. Fish wouldn't know where there was a protected area, not a protected area, if we man-made rules, and not creating that with the fish, that just worked. So he made a really brave decision, and there was Dr. Nick Smith from the Nelson area. He was the Minister of Conservation at that time, and he did a really good job. It's a brave decision, and he made it into total marine reserve. And so since that, we've seen a huge increase in the number of species and the number of fish. The fish behavior changes. It's just been fantastic. But it's only very small.
And we've
800 meters around.
We have some photos coming up in a little bit as well to show you some of the awesome sites at the 4 Nights Islands. And we will talk about them a little bit more specifically. For now, just in case anyone here doesn't know a lot about New Zealand or what marine protection actually is, we thought we'd give a brief introduction before we get into the nitty-gritties. So Aotearoa, New Zealand, has the 7th largest exclusive economic zone in the world. So we have an enormous coastline. We are responsible for a huge area of ocean, over 4 million square kilometres, or 1.5 million square miles for those overseas. It's 3.3% of the New Zealand population is somehow connected to the maritime industry or relating industries. That's $7.4 billion, which is roughly 3% of our annual GDP. But not only that, recreational and customary fishing is important around Aotearoa as well. And this is part of the reason why protecting some of these biodiversity hotspots and creating networks to ensure that species can continue to thrive is so important. And a really sad figure there is currently only 0.3% of our EEZ is fully protected in a no-take marine reserve. Did you have anything to say to that initially, Jeroen?
Yes, Siobhan, is that really only 0.3%? Not even 1%, Siobhan?
No.
Oh, that is bad, isn't it?
It is.
It is.
And you question me on that, and I have to question myself as well, because it really is quite shocking. And for a country that, a lot of our incredible cities and towns are located on the coast, and we really have a strong connection to our coastlines and to our marine environment. Yet at the same time, it has been missed in legislation and protection. So it's a bit disappointing, I think.
It is. Sometimes people will sort of quote slightly different figures. They say, but probably 20% is in MPAs, marine protected areas. What people don't realize is that, for example, a cable, underwater cable, is an MPA, because you can't go fishing in that area, but you can do everything else. An area where there is limited benthenic protection, they call an MPA, but everything else can happen. So when you really talk about protection, you're very right. It's only 0.3%.
Yeah.
And if you compare that with the land in New Zealand, we've got 30% protection on the land, which is a fantastic driver for us for biodiversity, for just sort of looking after our environment, for actually enabling people to sort of see what kind of world we live in. And it's a great driver of our tourism industry, which pre-COVID was our largest sort of overseas income.
Yeah.
So that is, when you protect something, it doesn't mean that it's suddenly useless or worthless. It's actually the opposite.
Yeah, and we will definitely we will talk about those opportunities in a little bit, because I think some of that reframing is so important. And looking at protecting something, it's not taking away those rights to fish, or it's actually providing an opportunity for so much more. So we'll get into that in a little bit. Briefly, types of marine protected areas. So like Jeroen just mentioned, 0.3% is a level, is covered under level 1 no take marine reserve. So nothing can happen. Being out on the boats with dive to Kaka, and you can't throw your food over the side of the boat, you can't feed the fish, you can't take anything home with you. It is really there to live in its own right. And it is incredible that your business exists to show people what that can look like, and it truly is astounding. So level 2 can mostly protected. Sometimes there's some fishing allowed, usually rod only. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jeroen, but that's still considered a marine protected areas. There's also others. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about the level 2 one. We've got, for example, marine parks around New Zealand, and not too far away from us, we've got a marine park at Nimi Whangata, where there is limited fishing allowed. And I would not take any customers over there because it's barren. There's nothing there. it does not work. Marine parks like that just don't work. Simple.
Yeah. There's also a few others like customary management, rahui, which mana whenua on Waiheke Island recently, they placed a rahui on the islands. There's species in the marine environment there that are absolutely just depleted. And so I'm not sure how long that's going to be in place, but really it's just a measure to try and help species and ecosystems recover in their own right. There's also the other marine protection tools there, but like Jeroen has touched on, potentially they don't go far enough. Is that?
Yep, you're right.
Cool. So biodiversity and taonga species. So New Zealand is incredible. We have over 50,000 species recorded, which is roughly 10% of all global marine species, which, we're a little island in the bottom of the Pacific, but like I said, we have a huge EEZ and it attracts all kinds of species. And Jeroen, did you want to speak briefly about some of the interesting species that you get at Poor Knights Islands? Because it is a bit of an oddball, I guess, in the sense of New Zealand, where you get some subtropical currents coming through as well. So there's been a few turtles and whale sharks and
Yes. Our whale sharks we have seen off the Poor Knights. I haven't seen them at the Poor Knights, but turtles for sure. I've seen turtles and swam with turtles at the Poor Knights. There's such a variety, and we sort of get some subtropical species sort of going past as well. So those of us that are right into underwater photography just have an absolute ball capturing all these images and seeing how many species we've got and the variety of them. The Poor Knights never ever disappoints. Whenever you go down there, you can't say, "Oh, I've been there, done that." Tell you a little story. Years ago, we went with a group of people to the Poor Knights Islands, and they wanted to go diving. We just had a new boat. The boat went out, had a little problem, came back, and we fixed it. My skipper said, because it was a little bit rough, said, "Oh, do you want to come out?" I said, "Okay, I'll come out as well. Why not?" Sort of support him. We went out to the Poor Knights. We went to one of the sites, and they all went diving, but they all went a little bit deep, and they weren't that experienced. So we went to the second site, which I've dived hundreds of times, and I sort of explained to the people what they could see over there, and they asked me, "You want to go for a dive over here?" I said, "No." And I said something really dumb, which I will forever remember. I said, "No, I've seen it all here. I've felt it cold." And as I was saying that, there were some rocks that are in that particular bay, and you can see them at low tide, but not at high tide. And I looked at those rocks, I thought the rocks, and my skipper as well, and they were moving. And what it was high tide, and there were 2 humpback whales just swimming past. So that shut me up. You can never say I've seen it all, because there's always something else.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so true. I think, I'm just blown away every time I go back. Been lucky enough to dive at the Poor Knights a few times, and every time I'm equally is amazed and really just immersed in that. It's a different world, and that's what a lot of people say who have had the chance to go there. It's just, it's indescribable almost. So, and unfortunately, we do actually have to be a bit of a downer here, because, species in New Zealand threatened with or at risk of extinction. 22% of our indigenous marine mammals, 80% of our shorebirds, and 90% of our seabirds. So those are some pretty stark and confronting figures there. And I know Poor Knights Islands has a lot of seabirds as well, some rare ones too.
Indeed. It's an amazing place. But like you're pointing out as well, things are changing. And even in my short lifetime and my short time that I've been going to the Poor Knights in the last, say, 30 odd years, early on, 30 years ago, we used to go out and see big schools of fish with a lot of seabirds on top, and usually underneath is you have dolphins and other predators, and it's just fantastic to go up to it and have all the diving gannets around your boat and boiling sea around you with fish everywhere. Yeah. Absolute delight for everybody. And then you keep on going to the Poor Knights, and there's another one. You stop off, and it's great. And then you go, and there's another one, and then you pretend not to see them because otherwise you'd never make it to the poor nights. Nowadays, when I go out, it's not as often anymore, but when I see the birds and we go up to them, I say, oh, let's go and have a look at it. And my staff tell me they hardly ever see that anymore. And the amount of fish life and the amount of bird life has significantly reduced. So even in the last 20, 30 years, and everybody I talked to about that, it's the same thing. People have been, but the problem is the baseline changes. When people go out, they see this happening and they think, wow, and the sea is alive. They don't really realize that there's only 10% left of what it used to be like. And I can illustrate the story of changing baselines. But the nice thing with the poor nights is it gives us a connection with how a lot of the seas around New Zealand used to be. No longer like that. And I broaden it out a little bit, and I go to the Pacific, and I go to Rarotonga, Niue, Samoa, and I've done all those places, and it's barren. There's hardly anything left. It's really, really sad. At one stage, we were looking at expanding our business into Rarotonga, and we looked at buying a little business there, a little diving business. We had a look at it, we made an offer, and it was in front of a rahui as well. So there were a reasonable amount of fish. There was nice snorkeling. It looked all very. It fell through. 2 years later, I was back there and going for a snorkel and a paddle, and there was hardly any fish left. And I hear, the rahui is gone. So there was anything left. Now I saw a gentleman standing in the water, a big, large gentleman with a mask on his face, and I paddled over to him. I was going to say to him, look, this is pretty useless, isn't it? I said, what do you think? And he came up and said, this is fantastic. I said, what do you mean this is fantastic? He said, I just saw a fish. I said, what do you saw fish? Where are you from? I'm from Texas. This is the first time he was in the water in his life. And he saw one fish, and he thought that was brilliant. That was his experience. His baseline is if you see one fish alive, it's great. Ours is from, if you don't see 1,000 fish, it's not looking that great, is it? So baseline changes, and the poor nights puts people from New Zealand and from around the world back in touch with, hey, how can it be? How should it be? Instead of what are we used to?
Yeah, absolutely. And that really just summarizes why marine reserves are so important, is they give us that perspective, and they also give scientists a chance to actually understand what could be, and how we might be able to get back to that. So they truly are incredible places, and I guess that's why we're here talking, is we need more of them. So so I did just want to touch on, before we get on to the poor night islands, so we have actually just got a new minister for oceans and fisheries. So previously we didn't have a minister in government responsible for the oceans. We had a fisheries minister, and they were seen as kind of two separate issues. And I guess I just wanted to hear your thoughts, Jeroen, on, do you think this is signalling change in the sense that we're starting to consider the ocean as a fundamental component to, if we do want to utilize it for food and as industries, are we heading on the right track at all? Is there any glimmer of hope that you've seen in terms of
No, that's a real interesting question. You put me on the spot because you didn't prepare me for it. I like it.
Sorry, it was in my notebook and I just did it.
No, that's good. Yes, Ministry of Fisheries has been a tricky little outfit, in the sense that the people that work for the Ministry of Fisheries, the scientists, have always been employed and associated with the fishing industry. So the Minister of Fisheries gets a particular viewpoint that is very strongly connected with the fishing industry. And the Minister of Fisheries has also got a veto right on any applications with regards to marine reserves. And so part and parcel of the reason why we haven't had a lot of marine reserves, not a lot of success, not anything big, is because of the strong influence of the Minister of Fisheries, whose preoccupation has been to maximize the yield, sustainable yield, they call it, of fishing. Now, we've seen lots of times with orange roughy, with taraki, that the limits we set, the total allowable catch limits we set, are quite often completely wrong, and we quite often don't understand really the whole ecosystem in which these fish operate or how long they actually live. And we've had some major disasters with fisheries management, and I'm going to give them a little bit of dig here in some ways, but let me just go a little bit worldwide, and then I'll come back. Worldwide, planet-wide, we just spent $3 billion in sending a probe to Mars, yeah, which is great. Yeah, it's $3 billion, a lot of money, but it's great for exploration. And what we're doing is we're trying to find any evidence, yeah, of a microbial life on planet Mars, which probably we won't find. But anyway, that's how much money we spend. Meanwhile, on planet Earth, we spend $30 billion subsidizing an $80 billion destructive fishing industry. Yeah, we're looking for microbial life on planet Mars, yet at the same time we do wholesale destruction of planet Earth. It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? So the other funny thing was is in so I'm talking about fisheries at the moment. On planet Mars, we've got on this little setup we dropped off over there. We've got 19 cameras that beam all sorts of information directly to planet Earth and tell us all about what they see and what they don't see. Meanwhile, New Zealand fishing fleet cannot have cameras on board the boat because it's too complicated. Yeah. So you can see it's not that complicated. And hopefully with Minister Parker, who is the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, he may get some broader insights. I'm wondering whether it would not be useful to have Ministry of Fisheries and a separate Minister of Oceans. So you can sort of, otherwise it's sort of, you've got to say like a Minister of Defense and a Minister of Disarmament being the same person. It's really difficult. Yeah. Yeah. And so I like the concept. I think it's fantastic, and we need to move more into that. And there's a lot more to go. We have a lot to learn. But at the moment, yeah, our focus of fisheries have been on extraction. Yeah. And the way the level of total allowable catch we've been setting has been far too large. Yeah. So we run the problem of fisheries collapse, and it happens quite a bit worldwide. Around New Zealand, we come to very close to those areas as well at times. And part and parcel of the problem is we talk about species, not about the whole ecosystem, and that just doesn't work. So a lot of work is being done now to sort of balance that out, and will take time. So I'm positive towards the future. I'm positive towards the fact that we've got a Minister of Oceans, that we haven't had that before. But I think we can make lots of improvements in those areas as well still.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit at the end about how those of us here in New Zealand can kind of, I guess, put the new minister to the test. So there are some tangible things that we can do to encourage more marine protection. So we will talk about that in a little bit. Right, I'm just going to share my screen again, but I forgot to ask you, because I think this is important when we were talking about biodiversity. Do you have a favourite species at the Poor Knights or elsewhere? And do you have a reason why? Do you have a story? I didn't prepare him for this one either. So.
No. Do I have a? That's an interesting one. Look. I mean, I love stingrays sort of congregating at Northern Arch and flying through there. That's just amazing how they sort of move through. But at the same time, what I always find really interesting is when you have big schools of fish, what's the decision-making process?
Yeah.
Whether go that way or that way. I can't ever help thinking about that. How do they communicate? How do they work it out? It's the same like big schools of sparrows that sort of go in the sky and decide which way to flock and fly, and that whole process. So it is the interaction between all the different species that I find so fascinating. It's not, oh, you are my favorite. Yeah. No.
I love
you
that.
are my favorite.
Yeah. I
Right.
love that. It really goes back to that connection.
Yeah.
And that just reminded me, I think every time I go diving, I just feel so incompetent. You're just underwater floundering around in your wetsuit and your big tank, and you just see these fish go past you so effortlessly. And yeah, it's quite incredible, I think.
Yeah. And I agree with you. One of the things I tend to do is I pretend to be a submarine, and my arm is sort of the steering place where I am, and my body just becomes the vehicle that moves my eyes through the water, and I just, yeah. And when you go a little bit deeper and you get the different species, because you lose the seaweeds, and you get all the other animal life that's down out on the gorgonians, and the stillness and the beauty of that environment, and you float through that like a submarine or like a helicopter, whatever. It's just that feeling you're describing, and you see this enormous amount of marine biodiversity around you, and which the poor knights have. Other places can be quite barren, but the poor knights have got that. It just amazes me how beautiful it is and what we have lost. So there's sort of a call to action in all of that.
Absolutely. Well, moving on to the Poor Knights itself, and I wondered if you wanted to give a little, I know you've talked briefly about it before, but dive to the Kaka. What do you stand for? What do you do? And, what was really important to you as a business?
Right, okay. Initially, when this pre-dive to the Kaka, I had a company called Equation, and our mission statement was, and that was the 5% at that stage that was protected. Our mission statement was to get the Poor Knights Islands into total protected area. It was a mission statement of that business. So we succeeded in doing that. Yeah. Now, we are operating a business that we try to explain to people the very things I've been talking about marine biodiversity, about species, about interaction, about ecosystems, about how important it is that we protect our marine environment, and give that message by showing people how the marine environment works and how you can interact with it, and how you can jobs derive from it and an economy derive from it without actually taking anything away. Through our business and a few other businesses over here, we bring in a lot of people going to the Poor Knights. We take about 15,000, and there are others that go as well in these private boats. When you look at the economic value of it, which is something I quite like to talk about as well, is we bring into our area, direct and indirect, about $10 million per annum into the economy. There's 200 people employed in the bars, the restaurants, the hotels, the accommodation, the boats, the dive guides, the instructors, everything. It's over 250 people around the area. It's seasonal, but it gets bigger. We don't take anything away from the environment. We actually give people probably some of the best days of their lives. And that is just something so precious and so good, and we love doing that. And then we try to do that, of course, in a sound environmental way. We look after our staff, we look after our customers. We try to provide the best possible experience you can get. And the Poor Knights is just, it's a world-class destination, and we try to provide world-class service with that as well, so people can take it away. 50% of our clientele used to be overseas, of the divers. Now, with COVID, it has changed a little bit, but it will come back. But getting that message worldwide is to, hey, marine protection really works, and marine environment is really cool. It's absolutely fantastic. And there's so much to see, so much to learn, so much to explore. And we're not living in Mars, we're living on planet Earth, where there is so much to do and so much to see. We should be right into it and learn more and more and enjoy that. So that's what we do. That's what our company delivers. So.
Yeah, I mean, my first breath underwater was at the Poor Knights with Dive to Kaka, and prior to that, I remember it all started my dad sat me down and said, you know, what do you want to do? I was on my gap year after school. I really didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what, you know, I was passionate about. And although that's kind of ever evolving, I think once I took my first breath underwater, I just, you know, it did open up a whole other world to me, and it definitely gave me perspective as well. And I think since then, it just, every time I go under or anytime I'm around the ocean, it really just, it makes me feel insignificant, but in the best possible way. I think it really just makes you understand your place within a very complex and incredible global ecosystem. And I think that's something that is just a real privilege to experience. And I know there's some incredible people around New Zealand who are doing work with like virtual reality, like Blake and NZGeo, who are working to deliver, you know, images from the Poor Knights Islands into classrooms and into perhaps to students who wouldn't otherwise get to see some of these things. So there is a lot happening, and it has, I think, just inspired, you know, a lot of people in the marine space, but also, you know, just in life in general. So yeah, these are some photos, some pretty cool photos there from the Poor Knights. And yeah, I wondered whether next, I did have some questions for you, Jeroen, but if there's anything else you wanted to say in regards to Poor Knights or dive, go for it. Otherwise we can
if you let me go loose, I can talk for hours. You know,
yeah, actually that's a bit dangerous.
From you. So, and I can talk about all the problems, that sort of that we are facing. It's going from ocean temperatures going up. It's going from warming seas. It's destructive commercial fishing, ghost plastic pollution, habitat destruction, biodiversity loss, corruption. You know, this kind of fishing gear. 90% of top predators gone. You know, deep sea mining, ocean acidification, more extreme weather we've seen in the last little while, melting ice, rising sea levels. Man, the problems that we are causing around the ocean is huge. But
and
we can change it,
and that's scary. It is scary,
and it's a way. People don't see it because when you look out over the ocean, it's a nice day, it's a nice bit of surf, you think, wow, you know, brilliant, beautiful ocean, nice blue, sun is shining, but what's happening underneath, the damage we have been doing is really significant. The good thing is we can turn it around, and there's a lot of people like yourself that are in that process at the moment that increase that awareness of what is happening and what we should do about it. And so that gives me always a big smile on my face when I see you guys come out, and so many others, they come back at the end of the day and, how was your day? I say, oh, brilliant. And then my next question is, did you see any fish? And I said, yeah. I said, oh, you know, if you don't see any fish, you get your money back. And they said, oh. But anyway, nobody's ever asked for their money back because there's so many fish at the Poor Knights. But if you were to do this at the coast, you might have to pay the money back to people quite often.
It would be a great business model.
And the fish behavior is very different. You know, fish are not curious doing their own thing. And then as soon as a diver hops in the water on our coast, fish know, oh, watch out, you know, somebody might come after us, and they stay generally far further away. It's not nearly the same pleasant experience as you've got at the Poor Knights and marine protected areas like total marine reserves.
Oh. Absolutely. Yeah. I was just going to get back to this photo of the Sand Daggers wrasse, and every time I go to the Poor Knights Islands, without fail, there will be a Sand Daggers wrasse that will come and befriend me for a dive. I think it thinks I'm going to crack open some kinner for it, but they are just so friendly. You know, they know they don't. Yeah, no, you don't crack open kinner. I think that's what it thinks. And they just follow you around. You know, no fear. They know that you're not going to take them. They know the rules.
Yeah, you know, Sand Dagger wrasse, we had a male on there, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
There's usually, they start off as juveniles and they're cleaner fit, they help clean other fish. Then they grow bigger, and generally females all the time. And there's one male with about 10, 15 females. Yeah. And then when the one male biggest female changes sex and becomes a male.
I do that.
I won't say promotes. I don't say promotes. I think they just change. They do a new role.
Yeah, they do, and it's awesome. And there's so many things like that, to discover, and there's so many things like that that we don't know. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, once you know those, you start to understand the ocean a lot better. Yeah, that's another thing about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The more you know.
No, I just wanted to talk a little bit because things have been a little bit depressing, because to be honest, it is sad what's happening in the marine environment. But there are success stories, and there are definitely reasons to be hopeful and to take action. And one example that I heard from around the Whangarei Kaka area was that of Kamo High School, where it took 14 years and over 1,000 students at this one high school. And they actually completely designed and proposed, I think it was 3 separate marine reserves. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
two got accepted, and the third one they didn't. So it's a mangrove area, and there's a little island in the harbour. Yeah. They are very, very tiny, very, very small, but they are proved that with consistent sort of pressure application and sticking with it, and the school did, and the school had a very good teacher that sort of was passionate about it and used to teach kids how to dive and stuff like that. Wow. That all helped, but the kids did it as well. My son was one of the kids that went to that school, and he was part of it. But there was also a girl called Samara Nicholson. She was part of it, and she set up this fantastic thing called EMR. That was Experiencing Marine Reserves. And so she went on from that, and it's been going now for 18, 19 years, and we've worked together quite a bit over all that period of time. So
I saw the boat out at the islands last time I was there. Actually, there was a whole group of students out going snorkeling at the islands as part of the EMR. So
exactly. So they were from all around the country, and what happens? This program's gone all around the country, and it's gone international now as well. So you talk at school with the kids about the marine environment, then take them snorkeling nearby the school. Yeah, and in New Zealand, we are close to water everywhere, so it's not too far away. And they snorkel, and they look at marine life, and they hold on to it and describe it and write poems about it and things like that. And then they get a trip to a marine reserve. And the Poor Knights has always been part and parcel of that. Yeah. Marine reserve as well. They go out there and they actually see the difference between their coastal environment and a marine protected marine reserve. And they just love it, and they learn about it. And the kids that do the best artwork and stuff like that. And we have an annual sort of from all around New Zealand, the kids with their parents and fly to Whangarei, go to Kaka, and we'll take them out on our boat and have a dinner over there, and they discuss things. And it's just that whole new generation. It's happened now for 18 years. So there's lots of kids that have been gone through this program and about the marine environment from a different point of view. So there's a lot of hope when you say, oh, there's so many threats and things like that. The Kamo High School initiative, and they're all small initiatives, they lead to fantastic outcomes. Yeah. And they lead to a generation of informed people that say hey, you shouldn't just leave that behind, or you should pick up that rubbish, or, it's the sea is sort of part of our taonga. It's part of our treasure. We need to look after, we're connected to it. So that it's fantastic when you can achieve that.
Yeah, it is. And that just, I think that segues into the next point I had really well, in that, the benefits of marine protected areas and marine reserves are often really long-term, and they're often hard to witness straight away. You may get glimpses of hope initially in some species that repopulate really fast, or, but on the whole, if these areas that we're trying to protect have been depleted over time and really have been threatened, and you're trying to restore them, that's not going to happen overnight. So do you think that plays a role in, I guess, the difficulty of getting more marine protection? Do you think it's this kind of time lag, because our political cycles are 3 yearly in New Zealand? You're trying to get quick wins. You're not really looking for those long-term changes necessarily.
And and I think I'm talking to a daughter of a politician here. He understands the sort of the ranges of things you can do as a politician in the 3 years, and you've got to look. And unfortunately, that is you have to be re-elected, and a lot of people do not understand the ocean and what's happening over there. They understand commercial fishing, or they understand recreational fishing. Whenever we talk about the ocean, whether you talk from a customary point of view, from a recreational point of view, or a commercial point of view, everybody, unfortunately, is talking about what's my piece of the carcass that's left. You know, there's a carcass, and everybody tries to get something out of it. Yeah. Nobody speaks on behalf of the ocean. Yeah, but very few people do. There's more and more now. You've got your Greenpeace and your WWF and your Forest and Bird, and more people and organizations are saying, hey, you know, and with underwater cameras and with more people diving and scuba diving and experiencing the marine environment, you get more awareness over there. And people are saying, hey, we don't have to take everything. It's not our given right to be able to take everything that we see. You know, we are part of this ocean, and we need to make sure that, you know, this ocean is a healthy biosystem. If it's not, we will all suffer from it. So that awareness is growing, and I'm really pleased about that.
Yeah, because that's the thing. We spoke briefly before we jumped on this call actually about. There was an article written by Kennedy Warren in New Zealand Geographic back in 2008, and it talked about the establishment of, you know, one of the first marine reserves in the world, in fact, at Goat Island in New Zealand, and our first marine reserve. And the headline of the local paper, this is back in 1977, was "Nothing to do at Goat Islands anymore." And I think that just speaks volumes, you know, and I think a lot of that remains today. And fast forward to where we are now, and we were talking about how there's well over 100,000 people visiting there annually to go snorkeling. There's school classrooms going out there. There's university students studying to understand those baselines more. You know, the impact of that on that community and on the environment itself is huge. How do we bridge that gap between what people think will be the case and what, you know, the potential and opportunity is?
Yes, well, that's an interesting one. You're talking about a blue economy here, and people don't understand it. There's a lot of studies being done, and there's the sustainable seas theme at a moment that's coming through, that's run by NIWA. And looking at, one of the areas they look at is the blue economy, and we'll just get onto that. I've been pushing that for years and years and years, because it actually, let me just go somewhere else on this planet. Let me just quickly fly over to Australia. Great Barrier Reef, significant, the largest living organism on the planet is the reef. It is under threat at the moment from a whole lot of factors on the outside. You've got global warming, bleaching, runoff, pollution, etc., etc., etc. And they're trying to work on it, but they've got 30% of that Great Barrier Reef totally protected. They've got zonations. So you zonate, like on the land, we have zonations. You can build cities over here. You can farm over there, you can do forestry over there. Zonations work. We don't do that yet on the ocean, but over there they did that. And initially it had 3% protection, and they increased that to 30%, and it's now nicely balanced. But it delivers 70,000 jobs, and about pre-COVID, $13 billion per annum coming in. That's what you call a blue economy. It's non-extractive. It's not like there is a huge, big oil exploration happening and they take things and leave things behind, or mining or fishing. They don't destroy the environment. They look after most of the environment and have a balance in there. And the balance they struck, 30% total protection, and there's other areas where there's a limited protection, and certain areas where there's no protection, but it's better balanced, better managed. And that seems to be quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you ever see New Zealand taking an approach like that?
Yeah.
Is
It
that
takes
what
a bit
you
of time.
hope for? Is that what you're
look,
hoping, or is that what you're working for, actually, to say?
Yeah, and I have been for a long time. I've been trying to push for marine parks for a long time, and I'm starting to get more and more people to sort of say, "Hey, actually, you're making a point that actually makes sense." The sad thing is you have to wait till most of it is gone away and it's severely depleted, and people say, "Hey, yeah, I notice I can't catch any fish anymore." And now the next thing will be for people to say, "Okay, yeah, we need more marine reserves." There's a number of people say, "Oh, we don't need marine reserves because marine reserve, what question were you asking that marine reserve is answering?" And a marine reserve is just looking after a part of our planet without any interference from anybody. Yeah, and the upsides of marine reserves and the overflow on the outside and the protection of a biosystem is so important that we cannot do without it. We see collapses of scallop beds, we see huge big kinnar barrens everywhere. We see we see problems with marine mammals in Bay of Islands that trying to re-establish marine mammal protection area, because instead of 60 or 80, it was over 200 recognizable dolphins. They've got about 19 left. The impacts are significant. Part and parcel is from people, but part and parcel is as well from the amount of overfishing we do. There's so much more stress for a lot of fish to feed themselves because we tend to sort of scoop it up in a net and mince it up for cat food in Australia. I mean, what's the use? We should be far more balanced and smarter with what we do, how we fish. We've got so many fish that are bycatch that we chuck away and don't use. We are pretty primitive with our fishing methods and how we consider the marine environment, and we're not. We don't have a lot of respect for the marine environment, unfortunately. So, do I see us changing? Yeah, because we have to. And I look at your generation, and there's a lot more people that went through it and say, "Hey, we question this. Why should it be like this? Why is it just for profit from an old company that we are, killing off? It does not make any sense." And doing it the other way around, considering the dire straits of what's happening around the world in the oceans, opportunity for people to fly to New Zealand and to go out and explore a thriving marine environment. Man, if you hop on a boat and you go out and there's dolphins and there's orca and there's birds and there's big schools of fish, you come away from, wow, what a fantastic day that was, instead of seeing nothing. It is just that whole interaction and then feeling part of it. And I think worldwide, there's a whole lot of countries that are now saying, "Hey, we need to do a lot more protection," because the message coming through. Take a little Polynesian island called Niue. They've got in their economic zone, they've got 40% absolute no take.
Wow, 40%.
40% around Niue is absolute no take. There's other areas around the planet at the moment that's starting to do that. And within the United Nations, it's now becoming an oceans policy that has been formed that is saying 30% of the world's oceans should be totally protected by 2030.
Exactly.
And so a whole lot of countries adopted that. And New Zealand should adopt the same thing. Like you said, we're the 7th largest marine ecosystem.
So what do we do? So what do we do? Because we have to close in a minute. But for young people watching this right now, what can we do, and what should we do to get us from 0.3% fully protection to 30%? Well, what can we do?
And the 30% comes by 2030. Yeah. So you talk about 9 years ago. Okay. So the issues, the pressure from commercial fishing, from pollution, from plastics, from rise in water temperatures, from ocean acidification, etc., etc., etc. If we do not sort of stop the take of all species in our ocean, which we've nearly done, and if you look at the lack of what's happened to tuna and stuff like that, if we don't protect at least 30% of the environment, we're going to be stuffed. People realize that. So what can we do? Is legislation. So how do you change it? You have a number of opportunities to influence that. You can walk up and down with a protest sign. You can talk to your friends. You can become a member of organizations like WWF, Greenpeace, Forest and Bird, etc. Organizations that are pushing governments to sort of change and to change legislation. But the good thing is there are political parties that also say, hey, we need to do a lot more protection. So if as a young person over 16 or over 18 and you can vote, then actually use that vote and say, hey, we vote for you if you do that. Yeah. And so through the political system, through stuff you write on your blogs, through discussions you have with your friends, through taking people out to marine reserve and experiencing, healthy marine environments, through proving that it actually will deliver a lot more for fisheries, and do more research on that, and it will deliver. It's our breeding species, etc., that we look after, but it has to be 100% protected. If you just stop for a couple of years, you won't have the same outcomes. Yeah, to be quite radical with it, but we do that in New Zealand, and New Zealanders understand that we have 30% of our land protected. Why 30% of our ocean? Yeah, it makes sense. We're all getting win. Yeah, and it's also about the next generation afterwards. Are you going to tell your kids, yeah, we really stuffed it up big time. Sorry about that. Yeah. We need to change behaviors. So you need to talk to people about it, but make it positive. It's a win-win. It's actually, I think it's actually win for us. We're not losing anything by protecting 30%. We're winning. It is. It's reframing the conversation, absolutely, and it is making sure we all understand that, as individuals, we do have a role to play, and we actually can play that role quite well. When you do think about politics and how it works, if you're putting enough pressure on, I guess society as a whole, or the government and power, and you're saying, we actually really want this, if they don't deliver on that, they'll get voted out. That's right. There's enough people. Yeah. It becomes politically smart to make moves on this, and although it's sad to talk about it like that, it is the reality is that if we actually get enough support, get enough education, and we do the work on the ground with people to bring them along on the journey, then it just makes sense. And no matter who's in power, it will be the politically correct and the smart thing for them to do. So, it's just, there's so much hope in that, and I truly believe that the more of us young people particularly that are growing up and really being able to communicate what is important to us and what is important that we, claim as, I guess it's awful to frame it like this, but it is a responsibility and a right for us to protect that environment. And I do think we should be able to do so. So, yeah. You can actually broaden it a little bit. This sounds a little bit old-fashioned, but it's actually a duty for all of us. Yeah. While we're here, that we sort of maximize the opportunities for the next generations and for this beautiful planet Earth. You remember when I did a trip to Mars, when we were looking for some bits, and then you come back and you reflect and you think about all these amazing documentaries that have been made about the oceans and about the life we've got here. And David Attenborough sort of talking about what he's leaving behind, what he has seen in his lifetime. I think those kind of witness statements are well underpinned with strong experiences and seeing the bigger picture, not just thinking, I can't catch a fish anymore or something like that. No, that's It's just actually looking after an amazing environment for which we have a responsibility, but we're part and parcel of it. If we kill off human beings as well at the same time, we're just going to be smarter and more sustainable, and it can deliver so much more. There's so much beauty in all of that. So, and when I look at you and your friends and they come along here, I always get really inspired and say, yes, the next generation, I can have a bit of confidence that I think in the right hands, and the politicians will be people probably like yourself and say, hey, we have to make some changes. You don't have to become a politician for that. So then don't feel the pressure. But,
I'll be doing the marching with the signs, but thank you.
So whilst at one stage I can really paint a negative picture, and it is really bad at the moment, I do have a lot of confidence in the next generation. You've had the benefits from a lot of work that a lot of good people, my generation, have done and communicated and have shown, and it gives you the weapons to move forward. So, hey, look at this evidence, and you can share that information so well, and you can see where things are happening. So things are so much more in favor at the moment to really motive forward on marine protection. When Bill Ballantyne started with the first marine reserves in New Zealand, he was by himself, and he argued, and he was a stubborn man, We owe him a lot, and the Wade dogs and all the others, the Cousteaus, and we all go through our journeys, and we live and learn and make mistakes and learn from it, but pass on more. And this sort of this army of ocean protectors, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the need for it is getting bigger and bigger and bigger as well. But I just believe that we will manage to sort of turn it around. And yes, you have a role to play, and all your viewers that are watching. Come on, guys. It's sort of what I'm saying is, make your voices heard, and don't forget to enjoy the marine environment. Go to those places, support them, and use your voice and say, hey, we need more. We need to do this. That's how we create change. So ourselves having that awareness, backing it up, being brave, and saying, no, we don't want that. We want this. And that should happen.
Well, thank you so much, Jeroen. I think that's a really good note to finish on. And I just wanted to say a massive thank you to yourself, not only for speaking with me today, but for all that you've done to get us to where we are now, and all that you will continue to do, no doubt. And I've learned so much from yourself and the team at Dive to the Kaka. And I just really want to say thank you. And I know, and I hope that there will be lots of young people that have watched today and that are out there already doing things and will continue to do so. So thank you to them as well. It looks like we've got our work to do.
Yes,